Welcome back to 5 on Fridays. I'm Brandon Kimbrough, excited for another episode. Today, I've got my homie, Ashley Harris, registered dietitian here with us. How are you, Ashley?
I am good. Happy Friday, Brandon. How are you?
Yes, I'm good. Thank you so much for giving us your time again for another one of these episodes. I feel like we've had you on a lot recently, which is great. Perfect timing as we lead into the month of March. For those who didn't know, every March is National Nutrition Month. And today, Ashley and I huddled and we thought it would be a great time to help you sift through all the noise so that you can make sure that the nutrition information that you are taking in and the things that are going to inspire you throughout your nutrition journey are from the right sources, because there is a lot out there and figuring out what's right and what's wrong is almost a full-time job. So Ashley, with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you to get us started.
Absolutely. And you're spot on, right, Brandon? There's so much information out there and it's like more and more every year. I saw a statistic the other day that Forbes said in 2023, they estimated there was 1.13 billion websites on the internet, which is just, mind-blowing. And I'm constantly asked, right, like, is this true? Is this not? And, by friends, family, clients, myself, right? I'm a dietitian, I know. And I'm always like, oh, interesting. So, certainly wanted to come out and just kind of talk about, how do we know what to trust? How do we know what not to trust? Yeah, as we look for nutrition information.
Yeah, I think that's super important. I think we do a great job here with our team, but we're not the only source of information that an employee or a family member would come across in terms of nutrition information and what to do, what not to do, what recipes are good and which ones aren't. Obviously, I think you would agree there's always the right answer is to seek a provider and have a consult like we have set up where employees can come and meet with you. But as you're just scrolling, maybe you're following someone on Instagram or, you're seeing an article in a Google search result. We kind of just want to talk about what things to look for and what things to avoid, essentially. So help us understand, Ashley, why is there so much confusion? How do we know where to look for reliable info?
Absolutely. And I think part of it is everyone has an opinion these days. I feel like, especially about nutrition stuff, right? We've all had our own journey. Certain things have worked for us. And that's coming from like the good intended angle. There's also the like clickbait and money and, this and that. And like, I'm selling you something that sounds too good to be true. It probably is. But, I always even say, even if someone's genuine and they're like, listen, I did this, it worked for me, everyone's got to do it. I liken it to like, look, if you survived a car crash because you had your seatbelt on, I'm not out there like a seatbelt safety expert, right? It's just like, we're going to want to talk to the experts. Also, I think the more that we learn in nutrition, the more we realize we are all different. We are very different genetically. We have different microbiomes, which play into things, different lifestyles. So even if it really worked for someone, it does not mean it necessarily works for you. And so, really what we want to do is say, like, what does the research show? And what does the research show consistently, right? To get these kind of, recommendations or just opinions. So the first thing I like to do when I'm looking for it is, first of all, look at the source, right? Like, who's this coming from? Is it a professional? Is it just, your neighbor down the street who's like put something out? Is this coming from a doctor, a dietitian, other healthcare professionals? Even if it does, it certainly doesn't guarantee that it's the right thing for everybody. And, one of the problems is when we look at research in humans, right, and nutrition research, there's so many factors that can play into it. So what I just mentioned before, right, our own genetic makeup, our microbiome, also, things we ate when we were kids impact our health, things that our mothers ate when they were pregnant impact our health. Lots of variables play into things. I always say I can't lock people in a room for a month and feed them oranges and see what happens, right? It's so even quality studies done in humans with nutrition research, there's a lot of confounding factors. And so what we're looking for is things that, what do we see repeated, right? Maybe there's a cellular study out there, and I've seen so many times this study done in a lab in a petri dish, here's an article about it, and all of a sudden Women's World Daily or something takes it and runs with it, right? And you're like, ooh, I don't know if we should draw those conclusions. So we're looking for research that is, we see consistency. And sure, animal cell studies are great. They can tell us mechanisms. They can point us in the right direction, but it's not how it necessarily plays out in our human bodies. So we want to see all of those aligning. And then we want to see those human studies, kind of repeated and that consistency there.
Yeah. And on that point, Ash, I know that there's a lot of different human trials that have to go through when it comes to prescription drugs and the drug market, but we don't really have the same sort of setup where we can do these randomized controlled trials, these these perfect sets of conditions for nutrition like that. Like you said, you can't lock somebody in a room for 30 days and give them just oranges. And, there's some ethical things when it comes to human nutrition that we have to look out for. So that's really, really interesting. So let's talk about where exactly we should look for them. And does it mean that if we don't have something from those sources, we shouldn't trust it? What do you think about that?
Two great questions. So, my first thing is looking for where is this coming from, right? So looking at the author or looking at the site, right? So things that we can trust, typically they're like government or health, education, like those types of systems, right? So, if we see like the CDC, for example, Centers for Disease Control or National Institutes of Health, or like the American Institute for Cancer Research, or like hospitals, right? Like Ohio State, or looking at like Cleveland Clinic or Mayo Clinic. These are all good sources where we know it's going to be evidence-based. We know it's going to be reviewed by peers. We know it's based on good quality studies. So things from those sources, I would say, for the most part, you could trust, right? And an easy way to kind of know, if you see like .org or .gov or .edu in the website address, that's usually a good indicator. Like this is, a good, evidence-based kind of website and that we're working with.
Not necessarily like .blogspot.
Right, right. But there are still good things out there, right? It's not saying everything else out there is bad. So then it's like, okay, we want to look at, if it's not from one of those sources, we want to say like, let's examine this. And so the first one I say is let's look at the author. Do they have credentials? Do they have like letters behind their name, that type of a thing? Again, it doesn't necessarily guarantee that that's accurate or true. Another thing we really want to look at is it peer reviewed, right? Are other people looking at this? Are they chiming in? Sometimes it'll say like medically reviewed by a source. And then looking for references, right? Like if we're going to say that, make these statements, okay, where are we getting this? And good quality articles are going to reference studies. They're going to reference places that we can go back and, kind of verify this information. That being said, and I learned this doing my thesis, just because they cite something as a resource or reference doesn't necessarily mean that's what it said, right? So do your own research, right? Okay, you see this fact, you're like, go follow up and see what that study is and see, is what they're saying in that study or that article, aligning with what you're seeing there. The other thing to keep in mind too is, okay, if we're referencing a study, who funded that study, right? There's a lot of funding from pharmaceutical companies, Coca-Cola, all of a sudden it's like, maybe sugar's not so bad, right? Like kind of keeping in mind, who's funding this. And then again, are we seeing this consistently repeated? Are we finding several articles that are research things that are saying the same thing? And then looking for up-to-date information. Things change. 30, 40 years ago, or maybe longer at this point, but doctors were like promoting cigarettes, right? Like just because, we're seeing one thing, we want to have the most up-to-date information. Nutrition is something, it's always changing, right? The more we learn. So looking for stuff that like, what is the most up-to-date evidence?
Those are great tips. And I think that helps a lot. When you think about trying to sift through and figure out, I should definitely make sure that this person has the appropriate credentials to be talking about this thing. I should definitely make sure it is showing up multiple times, right? It's not just one person making a bold claim, but multiple people who are studying or researching or talking about this topic are seeing the same kinds of things. I think that's super, super important. Are there any other last takeaways you want to make sure that we have as we go out there in National Nutrition Month through the sea of endless nutrition information?
Yeah, navigating this like wild, wild world. I think just, again, like every time you look at something, just pause, right? Especially if it sounds too good to be true. If it was that simple, we'd all probably be doing it and be in perfect health. But, so I like to kind of think of like the 4 R's, right? So like read. First of all, like read the article, right? And then review. Who wrote it? Who else has reviewed this? The reliability check. Okay. Are they citing research? Is it sponsored? Is this coming from a government or health agency? And then that referencing again, is it citing resources is it citing research? And then go do your own research. Does that research align with what that article says, right? Or who sponsored that research? Just kind of put your investigator hat on. And then I say, as always, utilize your health professionals, right? You can always go ask your doctor. Or I like to plug, like, you've got a wealth of resources through Healthy Columbus, right? We've got dietitians, we've got nurses, and, Whitney and Wendy are awesome. And if they don't know, like, they'll absolutely reach out to me or, send you in that right direction. So yeah, if you ever have questions, just reach out and verify it. Because I think it's always better to err on the side of caution and know that, hey, what I'm kind of taking in and then applying to my life, first of all, is true. And then is it safe? And is it safe for me, right? Because we just can't make these generalized statements with how unique and individual we all are.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just want to like clue people in. We talked about different things for National Nutrition Month, and I'm like, I think this is number one because there's so much out there and so many different topics, and like, how do we kind of get to the truth of it?
Yeah, no, it's perfect. It's super timely. I'm really glad we're having this discussion. Obviously, National Nutrition Month, as a month that is celebrated, is the perfect time to be having these kinds of discussions, as people are, whether they're looking on their own or they're sort of being force fed through what different publications are putting out. Everybody's trying to take advantage of the interest in National Nutrition Month. So we just wanted to come on here today and make sure that everybody had a few little talking points, a few little tidbits to make sure that they were looking at this information with the right amount of healthy skepticism while still maintaining and being excited about nutrition and learning and educating themselves so that they can take better care of themselves, right? Ashley, that was our goal. So thank you so much for joining us today. We will have you on in future episodes as always, as you're sort of our resident co-host now. We appreciate it. But yes, that's it. If you guys have any other questions, reach out to the Healthy Columbus team. Don't forget, we have now transitioned as of the first part of February where employees can register and have free 30-minute sessions with Ashley. Our wellness living platform, our scheduling tool makes it super easy. All you have to do is create an account and then book 30-minute sessions with Ashley, and you guys can dialogue and deep dive on any number of nutrition topics that you may have. With that being said, Ashley, thanks again for your time. Happy Friday, everybody. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you in the next episode.
Perfect. Thanks, Brandon.